You like giant tomatoes? Come join me in the chaos. Alright, this tomato plant is ridiculous. I ended up having to use rebar. You ever had this happen? I had to use rebar to hold this thing up just because it kept falling over. Sticks kept snapping. So I finally just found some scrap rebar and just pounded it into the ground to hold up this ridiculous amount of tomatoes. I don't know how much fruit I have, but these things are pretty big. I mean, look at these things. Oh, branches in the way. Oh, it's not even as big as some of these other ones though. So some pretty massive tomatoes, but there's a ton of them. And I just wanted to explain to you how I did this particular giant tomato plant. So notice down here I have mulch, and then I've also, some people tell you it's really important to weed around tomatoes, and I wanted to do an experiment. I've been experimenting with a few different companion ground covers. This one right here is called violets, and so I've been allowing these violets to just exist on the ground, and I found that somehow they nurture the soil. The combination of these different plants with mulch and mycelium, they just keep the soil happy. And I'm guessing it has something to do with the microbial life. If you're a soil scientist, please chime in and enlighten us all. Long story short though, this thing is creating massive tomatoes. I have a few other strategies I used besides tons of mulch. So I also buried the tomato plant deeper, like some people say is a good idea, and it absolutely is. You get way more roots, which means you get way more absorption of nutrients from the surrounding area. And of course the mulch is constantly breaking down and releasing whatever nutrients were in the wood chips. And this is just the free arborist wood chips you can sign up for from your local city. And like once a month, they just come and dump a giant truckload of mulch. Luckily I have the space for the mulch. Some people don't, so you gotta buy bags of it. But I just get a huge truckload of mulch once a month, and I just unload wheelbarrows to all my plants. And yeah, this one tomato plant, I only got one back here, but it's an incredible amount of growth. So tons of these giant tomatoes. I'm gonna have to harvest some of these because I don't want them to get attacked by birds and things. But such an easy process. I mean, this thing produces more tomatoes than my family uses. I think me and my wife are the only ones that really like tomatoes, and you know, I'm getting probably a dozen tomatoes a week. And then there's a whole bunch on deck. This plant's also super easy to propagate, especially if you have like a hydroponic system. I have an arrow garden, and you can literally just take like 3-node cuttings from these long stems that are probably, it looks like they're producing a little bit of fruit. But I've noticed that the central branches seem to produce the most fruit. These lateral branches, they're important because they, you know, gather light, they gather energy, and then the energy feeds back to the main plant, and the main plant allocates that energy for growing giant tomatoes. So yes, don't go nuts and chop them all off, but they're a pretty good resource. And then a strategy I use for making sure that they root really well is if you look really close, some of these stems will have little bumps on them, and those bumps are usually from higher humidity causing rooting. You can see it a lot better down here. So you look right here, see those bumps? If you see any of those forming on your lateral branches, those are your best bet for quick rooting, even in water. A lot of people probably already know that. You can also layer these as well. And what that means is you would take this branch once it gets to the ground and just throw some mulch on top of it, and then those roots will develop. Oop, I actually have some under here. So if you look real close, the little pimple looking things, each of those bumps will bust through and they'll produce roots, and then you can get new plants going. And so I'm in zone 6 in Missouri, and so what my plan is as I approach fall, I want to overwinter this particular tomato plant because I love its genetics. It loves being in mulch. It loves being companioned with my ground cover that I just have growing in my yard, which is perfect for my yard because that's how I plan on growing it, because I'm not one of those ones that's going to come out here and pick weeds all day. I believe that these plants are nurturing the soil, and the soil's happy with a living root in it. You know, standard ideas of permaculture. So there you go. I hope some of those ideas help you to grow massive tomatoes for your family. Thanks for joining me in the chaos.